Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Now, from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
This half hour being brought to you by Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Auto, home, light business, boat, motorcycle, RV. Even, they help with financial work. I mean, a lot of things they do. A lot of things. They're really the pros at it. And they're the ones that can get it done for you because customer service means everything to them. They go out of the way to make sure that your insurance needs are taken care of. It's all at Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Ryan Snyder on 3.com. And Blue White Illustrated now joins us. Ryan, it's great to have you back, especially this busy time of the year.
Yeah, this is it. This is that June, beginning of July. It used to be the end of July, but of course the NCAA got rid of that little brief 10-day recruiting period at the end. So cramming everything into 4 weeks now instead of 6 weeks, which is interesting. The NCAA dropped that stretch at the end, but they did not change the amount of camps you can host and all those kind of things. So it'll be an interesting ending here, we'll say that.
But this is a never-ending process, Ryan. I mean, that's the part about this. It seems like there's something new that comes out every 3 or 4 days in the off-season until we get to this month.
For sure, yeah. I mean, especially with all the changes recently, right? I mean, obviously January is a full contact period now for juniors. It used to only be, coaches could go to seniors, in-home visits, things like that. But, with so many seniors, seniors, high school seniors enrolling early now, that was kind of obsolete. So they made a good change there as far as, coaches can now talk to, junior prospects on their way up, and the way the recruiting schedule and everything's sped up, I think it's a really good move. And now May's the same thing. It used to be an evaluation period. You can only go out and really kind of just watch guys from afar. Now you can interact. You can do in-home visits, all types of stuff. So there really hasn't been much of a break. You still have that February dead period, and now all of July and August is a dead period. But that doesn't include electronic conversations, so texts, over the phone, all that kind of stuff. So it never really ends.
Well, Penn State, it seems like they've been really ahead of the game of getting verbals at this point. Is that accurate based on what they've done versus what some other people have done? Yeah,
18 right now. It depends how you look. I mean, right now I think they're second or third in the country, I want to say. I know USC is far and away beyond everybody else. It seems like they found some money out there. We'll leave it at that. I mean, actually, their coach actually kind of talked about that today in an interview with On 3, that they're being a little more aggressive from that perspective. I think they have 27 commits now, which is, I kind of think that's where Penn State's class may end up, somewhere in that ballpark. But, at 18, I believe it's the second highest for Power 4 schools. I think Rutgers is up there too, and Louisville, I think Notre Dame is in that ballpark with 16, 17, somewhere in there. But yeah, they're doing a great job with that. They've always done well with that, and that's why we see so many 2028 kids coming to games, and they're always been very aggressive when it comes to scouting and those things like that. So this is kind of a rinse and repeat. It's similar to previous years. They've stayed in that pattern, and it's a good pattern to stay in because it keeps you ahead of the game.
All right, so let's get to this camp time. Look, Penn State decades ago was one of the first to really take these camps and use them to their advantage. Even to the point when somebody asked me, what was Eli Manning when he came back to do the Chad Powers thing? What was his draw about this place? He went to camp here, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was one of those guys who went to camp. And that's why he always has had an affinity for the place. So James Franklin, Andy Frank, and their staff, what does it take for them to organize these camps so it's advantageous for them to get the best read on the talent they're looking at?
Yeah, it's twofold now. It used to be a lot of prospect camps, right? And that's basically open to everybody. But, of course, through their communication, they're, nudging some of their top guys to come up here. And we still see those. There's, I think, 3 or 4 of those this year. But the one thing they've really done in the last handful of years is open up to 7-on-7s. And there's no difference as far as what they're able to do on 7-on-7s. And basically, the one thing that's been advantageous for them is basically every Friday now, so we'll have it this Friday and the following two, it opens up some of the top schools to come up here and compete. And so you're going to, like, for this upcoming weekend, we know Gonzaga will be up here, Good Counsel. Those are 2 of the prominent programs in Washington, D.C. And basically, obviously those guys are here to compete and work with their team and things like that. But it gives Penn State an opportunity to also work out some of their young guys who, maybe wouldn't have came up here otherwise. So I think that's been a major plus for them. There's a reason that, I think a handful of years ago it was 1, and then they jumped to 2, and now it's 3. And I think if they could do it more, they would. But there's only, so many teams in the area that, are willing to travel on Fridays and things like that. So they've found that good sweet spot of 3 7-on-7s. And, I think this upcoming week's kind of be a little bit of a smaller one compared to what we've seen in the past. I think it'll be around 20, 24. We'll say 2 dozen schools max, somewhere in that ballpark. But in previous years, they've had 40, 50-some schools. And sure, there's a bunch of smaller schools within the region that don't really produce Penn State-level talent. But at the same time, it does attract, the Harrisburgs and like I said, there's Washington, D.C. schools, some of the prominent programs in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And, again, it's a smart way of getting talented players who otherwise may not want to camp on campus. Now, those guys don't have to work out for Penn State if they don't want to, but, at the same time, Penn State's allowed to, and if the player agrees, they're able to get different testing numbers, 40s, broad jumps, all those things on, like I said, a player who maybe otherwise, couldn't just travel up here on his own because of family schedules or whatever it may be. So those have been the prominent things. And then, those regular prospect camps, they regularly attract hundreds of players. Out of those hundreds of players, few dozen of them are probably Penn State caliber, or at least we'll say Division I caliber players. But you're able to do that 4 or 5 times out of the year, sprinkle in those 7-on-7s that, attract good players, some younger players as well, and it works out for them. Just one last thing, like, for example, Jasir Rogers, one of their best commits in the 2026 class, he came up with a 7-on-7 team last year. I didn't even know who he was. I think Penn State maybe knew who he was a little bit, but then he comes up and works out and runs a 4.3 and all these crazy numbers, and boom, before you know it, he has an offer, which I think at the time, JMU offered, and then Indiana did, obviously, when Cignetti went to Indiana. But the point is, he was just kind of a below-the-radar kind of player that really no one really knew about. Now he's a 4-star prospect, and it's that 7-on-7 that gave Penn State the ability to really see how athletic he is, and look where he is now.
All right, so in the next couple of weekends, who are a couple of prospects that you're keeping your eye on, but Penn State's also really keeping their eye on?
Yeah. Oh, there's a bunch. Well, let me clarify. There's a handful of positions that things really matter. And I think offensive line and defensive line are the 2 to circle more than any other position. I mean, just going down the board, right? They have 2 quarterbacks committed. You have Messiah Mickens committed at running back. You got a handful of three wide receivers committed. They're happy, with all those. Obviously, if they can add talent, they will at running back and receiver, but it's not necessarily they have to. They're happy with the guys they have. They like to get a tight end. That's the one position they don't have anything at yet. But obviously, they signed 3 tight ends last year, all of whom were, top 300 or so players, including a 5-star, right? So that position's always going to be talented at Penn State. It's nothing to worry about. To me, offensive line, they have 3 guys committed publicly right now. I feel like Marlon Bright, a 4-star prospect out of New Jersey, is probably likely. He's going to announce during his family reunion in July. But that'll put him at 4, if Marlon Bright goes through with that, which I expect him to. And boy, the amount of talent that they're hosting offensive line-wise is really impressive. I mean, they still have 3 or 4 guys that, I've had circled as maybe top 6, 7, 8 on their board for months now. For example, one of those guys, Grayson McHugh, is going to come through this upcoming weekend. He's out of LaSalle, has really taken off, play that Penn State identified early, and now they're in the mix with Texas and Notre Dame. He's a 4-star guy, and honestly, I think he's going to be someone who just keeps rising up the rankings as far as continue to gather information on him, how athletically he is, stuff like that. But then defensive line, too. They have a couple defensive tackles committed, but you have another guy like Damari Simeon, another player coming up this weekend who they really are high on. They've been high on him for a long time. Another kind of, I think he's right outside the top 150 right now, but certainly a guy that another one actually who camped last year, let me clarify that too, that I think they're going to be really pushing hard for here. And then there's just a ton of really good defensive ends in the region. You have Carter Meadows, a 5-star. You have Luke Wafel, who, right now is only a 4-star, but we have him ranked like 17th in the country. And if you understand how our rankings work, basically he'll be a 5-star. We just kind of progressively add to the 5-star ranks as things go on. So a couple 5-star guys coming up this weekend. There's a bunch of other quality defensive ends in the region like Tyson Harley and Jackson Ford. Harley's from Gonzaga, which is actually the same school as Carter Meadows. You have Jackson Ford, too, as well, down in Malvern Prep. So I really circle O-line and D-line. I think they're pretty happy with linebacker. Cornerback's a spot with 2 guys committed right now. I think that could be 3 or 4 because that's another spot where you have Kari Adams, a potential 5-star.
Right.
You have Brandon Arrington out in California, true 5-star. So basically where I'm going with this is they have their base of their class pretty well set at every position, but defensive end, and they want to sprinkle in some more offensive linemen. And then on top of that, it's really just kind of shooting high for some of these guys to finish really strong in the class. And ranked 11th right now by On3, they have the opportunity to absolutely finish with a top 10 class.
Okay, so how deep in terms of years do these camps go? We're talking a lot about 26, but does it go as far out as 29 now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was a 2030 up this past weekend. I was down in Baltimore myself for the Under Armour camp, but I remember somebody pointed out to me.
What was your thought on that?
On Under Armour?
Yeah.
So, funny timing, really. I mean, just because of how many 2026 guys were taking official visits this past weekend, right? So, on one hand, I think Under Armour and some of the camps need to do a better job of moving the Mid-Atlantic region up. It doesn't help that Elite 11 now does this All-22 camp, which is similar. It's kind of a competitive camp. They bring in not just quarterbacks anymore. And long story short, of course, I think if you follow recruiting, you would know that was in State College 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Then they had a New Jersey camp Memorial Day weekend for Under Armour, and then that forced the Baltimore camp to end up being the first weekend of official visits. Well, with so many of the top 2026 guys are taking official visits elsewhere, kind of made the camp a little bit lackluster. Now, actually, I'll be very honest with you, from my end, I like that because those camps are my opportunity to get to know the 2028, 2027 guys, meet parents, put faces to name. So from my perspective, it's good. From a fan's perspective, what they want to read and learn about, they don't care too much about the rising sophomore when Penn State's trying to put a bow on, a really good class right now. So it's good and bad. It works out well for me, but you kind of see the results more in 6 months, if that makes sense.
Right. No, exactly. And the coaches, when you talk to them, it's one thing to watch them on video, and of course they get out and they see games. But what does it mean to them to get these firsthand evaluations on some things they need to see?
It's massive. I mean, there's so many players where they check 7 of the 10 boxes, right? But how fast are they, right? Or how much have they grown in the last handful of months? I mean, you're talking about 16 to 17-year-olds. My kids are young, but I know watching my little kids grow, these guys are growing even faster. I was talking to a coach today about the up-and-coming player, J.B. Shabazz. He's a really good offensive tackle out of North Carolina. He's saying in the last 8 months, the kid's added almost, I think, 1.5 inches, and, it's put on real good muscle, right? Kind of losing that baby fat. And, now that player has gone from kind of a 3-star at most sites, and right now we have him as a top 60, 70 player in the country because we were able to get a new evaluation on him and go back, look at film, learn more things. So it's as you would expect with teenagers, right? I mean, they're always growing. Things are always changing. Not only that, you got school ending in May, so academics are always important, right? You got to make sure some of those guys are getting across the line academically, so that's a big part of that May period, being able to go out and watch guys. But then, when we circle back to Penn State's camps, being able to get those accurate numbers on guys are absolutely massive. And if you look at Penn State's class right now, Alex Haskell camp, Daryl Carey camp, Jazeel Hart camp. These are just some of the most recent guys. All their quarterbacks, or Peyton Falzone camp before. Troy Hune hasn't camped at Penn State yet, but he will. Actually, excuse me. No, actually, I think he did when he was younger. Let me check that. But Cy Mickens, if you look through their class, like 3/4 of their guys, maybe it's not that much, but at least half of them, I would say, have camped and have put together, an accurate feel for just how athletic these guys are. Then you get those hand sizes, those feet sizes. James talks about it all the time. He wants, big hands, big feet, and look like a baby, because that means you got a lot of progression still to go physically. So just being able to add that all up at these camps and getting those numbers, and especially for young guys too. Like if you're a young guy, you come up here and you run a really good time, and you got 2+ years of high school to go to improve on that time. Man, that stuff goes a long way with James and Andy and all those guys. So it's a massively important time for those camps, and for a lot of these players to take their recruitments from it's somewhere in the middle right now. They're getting a handful of good offers to absolutely exploding, and seeing these guys become top 200 or so prospects down the road.
To the fan out there, can you explain to them the value of Andy Frank, Kenny Sanders, and Alan Zamitis as to what they mean to this entire process, and how important it is to just have a separate staff that can do all of this?
They've never been more important than they are now. And give James a lot of credit, right? Like, fans always look back on, he was flirting with this school, flirting with that school. Really, I think fans now understand a lot of that was about, gaining more money for the program and being able to hire out a bigger staff. What's their staff now, Steve? Almost 60 people, I believe.
It's right around that neighborhood, Yep, around there.
It's 50+ for sure. And, a large portion of that now, I want to say it's over a dozen recruiting staff. And there's different ways to look at that. But the top guys, obviously, Andy Frank, general manager. Andy's a Princeton grad. I think anyone who's met Andy knows he's an incredibly intelligent person. And, for him, I believe most of the stuff, don't worry, he's overseeing a lot of things, but, he does a big part of the NIL and the money aspect of that, and there's a lot of other things he oversees as well. Kenny then, especially him and Alan Zamitis too, and I don't want to leave out Chris Mahomes and some other guys.
Chris Mann,
Rashad and all them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they do, Kenny kind of leads that team as far as the one-on-one interactions and recruiting and those things. Kenny's actually allowed to head out on the road now with some recent changes and the way the NCAA allows not just absolute assistant coaches to go out on the road. Right. So he's been all over the place the last couple of months. But, those guys do a great job of building relationships from very early ages, too. They're not allowed to contact the 2027 class. I think it's actually going to be about 10 days from now. I think June 15th is when they can start, regularly contacting. But because they get guys here to visit early, well, then they get put in the door with the parents and all that. And when you're an underclassman, you are allowed to contact them all you want. So, getting those guys here early, getting those relationships built, that's how those conversations start at a young age. And Kenny and AZ and all those guys do a phenomenal job with that. So, recruiting staff sizes have never been more important than they are now. And the other thing I'll add to that, too, is because they are focused strictly on that, it frees up so many other things for the true assistants, to focus on the team, to focus on the development. And, we're talking about a 12, 14, 16-team playoff, whatever it is coming forward. Penn State should be in the mix there regularly because of all these little things and, just the overall financial commitment and all that, too, to build up this kind of a staff and the facilities, all that kind of stuff. So they're in a good spot. It's got to keep the momentum going.
That's why I praise the patience of James through this entire House settlement, because, look, there's no, they want to keep as many players as possible in all this. And I think anybody that understands what you just said, a 16 or maybe even potentially 17-game run, there's an attrition rate that you need as many bodies as possible and not just 5 stars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about practice guys too, right? You need everybody. Everyone truly does make a difference in that kind of a deep of a schedule, right? So I'll be interested to see how this plays out. I'll tell you what, I feel bad for them. I feel bad for all these coaches trying to figure this stuff out because what are we? We're less than a month out from when it's supposed to start, and they still don't have answers, which is crazy to me. But at the same time, didn't we all kind of expect that to be the case? At least I felt like many did, at least.
Well, the original settlement, just so the audience knows, was supposed to be done by Friday. And if it wasn't, then it would go to trial. On Monday, she extended it to June 27th. So this is where we are right now in all this. Ryan, thank you so much. Busy time, and you gave the audience a lot of great information as usual. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Let's catch up at the end of the month. I think that June 20th, 21st, 22nd kind of range, they should be hosting, their whiteout camp, which used to be in July, and some other things as well. So that'll be a good time to catch up, see where they've been at, and what to watch for moving forward.
Sounds great, my friend. Thank you so much.
Take care, Steve. See you, bud.
Ryan Snyder, Blue White Illustrated on 3.com, joining us on the show today. This half hour has been brought to you by our good friends at Purdy Insurance. Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Auto, home, life, business, boat, motorcycle, RV. We all have multiple insurance needs, and they organize all of them and save you money wherever they can. All at Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
There's something to be said about a sale with a handshake, a service technician who really knows what he's doing. They can explain it in English what the problem is. There's nothing better than having that friend you could trust in the area. That's Sunbury Motors, where you get selection, knowledgeable salespeople, and prices that fit your budget, and more important, that friend you can trust. Welcome to Sunbury Motors, Kia, Ford, and Hyundai. You could shop other dealers and compare prices, but at Sunbury Motors, you get their lowest price promise. They research the current used vehicle market and guarantee their used car prices are the lowest. If you find a lower price, Sunbury Motors will beat it. 3 dealers all in one. See their full new and pre-owned inventory at sunburymotors.com. Pick out a vehicle you like and schedule your test drive online. Follow them on Facebook. Sunbury Motors Ford and Hyundai, North 4th Street, Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.